Welcome to Armchair Expert, Experts on Expert. I'm Dan Shepard. I'm joined by Lily Patman.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Returning guest, one of our favorite guests.
Yeah, really fun expert.
Oh my God, the one and only Paul Bloom. Paul is a psychologist and a professor at Yale University. Can you see how much struggling I'm doing?
Yeah, and also because you have to hold the phone so close to your eyes. I thought the whole point was...
Okay, no. These glasses are hard. Okay. They really are. I feel like I could get in a bulldozer and immediately operate it. I could drive anything, and fucking operating these glasses.
Yeah.
I'm learning. Okay. Poor Paul Bloom. He's our favorite.
He is.
I mean, I think he's the most brilliant psychologist alive. He is beyond for me.
He is. We cover a lot of fun, different topics in this, which I really like.
Mm-hmm. That's what's so fun about him. He'll dance in any genre.
He'll go with you.
He will. He's got a bunch of great books. The Sweet Spot, Against Empathy, Just Babies, How Pleasure Works. He has a new book out right now that I loved called Psych, The Story of the Human Mind. In essence, this was his Psych 101 class.
Yeah.
That was the most popular class at Yale for years. He would then do that in a spoken word version, and now he's written a text, and it's really incredible.
We recommend.
High rec. Please enjoy Paul Bloom.
He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert.
Oh my God, too many pages for Paul.
No, just enough pages. Hello.
Oh my God, you're here on an amazing day. Dax is wearing a jumpsuit for the first time in his whole life.
In my whole life. And Paul, it's a little too snug, but I ordered it. It came. I'm wearing it.
So you're wearing a jumpsuit.
Yeah, and it's plaid.
It's really cool.
It looks good.
Do you say that sincerely or as out of just politeness?
Yeah, that's a jumpsuit.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah.
It does look good. You pull it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brad Pitt wears skirts now, so Dax has to keep up.
I had to do something,
Yeah.
Paul. Guys are wearing skirts.
He wore a skirt to premiere. I'm very interested in perversity, so I use this example. And when asked why he did it, he says, we're all going to die someday, so let's mix it up.
Yeah.
Okay, did you buy that explanation?
I don't know. Some people can pull this off. Me, I got a new blazer, which is green.
Also
Yeah.
very nice.
For me, this is pushing the envelope. This is my jumpsuit. This is my skirt.
There has to be some psychological studies that try to find some ingredient that makes people adventurous in their wardrobe. Is there some principle out there?
I think it's one of the big ways people are different. I would say you were both probably very, the expression they say in psychology is open to experience. And that personality level, you're open to experience.
Do you have an area of your life that you're flamboyant? Where you're almost like, you think people might look at you and go like, oh, wow, this guy drives a yellow Miata. Do you have anything in your life
showy
that could be described as flamboyant?
There's some line by Flaubert about artists being bourgeois in their everyday life so they can be flamboyant in their work. And sometimes my work gets flamboyant. My life is actually, I will just admit it to you and to the 10 million other people listening, kind of stayed. I have 2 older children. I'm happily married. Regular job. Yes.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Sometimes I drink some whiskey, whatever.
That's the dream, really.
Your work is flamboyant. I guess you save your provocativeness for your work, which I guess we're all grateful for.
Thank you.
Some of it, I think, is childhood. This whole thing, this jumpsuit you're seeing me in.
It's the plaid jumpsuit, which is really striking.
You're right. I have kind of a mechanic one I wear as well. No one really notices.
Oh,
so it's actually
right.
not my first jumpsuit.
Because
but
it's fitted. It's like a piece.
It's too
a
small.
piece.
Yeah, we covered that.
Well, no.
When we did this last time, I thought this was the preamble to the podcast. And I talked about all sorts of, and it really embarrassed me. And now I know this is the real thing.
Oh, yeah. We have a saying here, ABR, like from, ABC, always be closing. It's ABR, always be recording. So it's recording before I enter the space.
Yeah. So you were telling me about your jumpsuit.
Yeah, I was just going to say that early on, I decided, I'm going to choose clothes and hairstyles to be a distraction from my face that I don't like. It was a tactic. It was a lane I picked. And then I just got stuck in it. I think that became my identity so young that now if I'm not doing anything, I just feel like I'm no longer myself.
So even when you're at home by yourself, you'll go for the more flamboyant.
It's more this, I'll just go like Boy, you haven't really made an effort at all in a long time. Are you withering on the vine? What's going on? Who have you become?
Yeah.
Okay. Last time we spoke, a year and a half ago, we were all conveniently watching that marriage show, but the infidelity scenes from a marriage or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all three of us were really intrigued by it.
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah. And Oscar Isaacs.
You know, I watched another couple of episodes and it got so grim, I just stopped.
It was so sad.
It was too much. I would say to people, go ahead and watch it, but certainly not with your wife or your husband. The acting's worth observing. It's off the charts, but maybe not the best thing for a husband and wife to watch.
Did they have a scene where the whole scene is like in the bedroom and she's explaining to him, says, I'm leaving you. I'm leaving for this man. I fell in love with him. We had crazy sex. We didn't leave our hotel room for 3 days. And he's just listening to this and begging her to stay.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
It just killed me.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, that's the exact scene we talked about last time. So I guess I wanted to just be trivial for a second before we launch into Psych. And just, I'm curious, what are you watching now? And I'm praying you've watched this one thing Monica and I are obsessed with so we can get your take on it.
Yes.
But what are you watching now?
The Last of Us.
Okay, great.
I haven't done that yet.
I'm watching
You are?
that. Yeah.
I don't know the video game, but it's beautifully acted and extremely well done.
Does it come from a video game?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This may be the first one that was a good transfer, I guess, having not played the game.
What are you two watching?
Okay, there's a documentary about Sarah Lawrence. What's it called?
It's called Stolen Youth. It's on Hulu.
No.
Oh, fuck, Paul.
This cult that kind of emerged out of Sarah Lawrence having nothing to do with Sarah
Yeah,
Lawrence.
just poor Sarah Lawrence. It happens to be the setting for this. But in a nutshell, there's 7 or 8 students living in off-campus housing. One of the girls' father gets released from prison. He comes to sleep on the couch, and then he develops these relationships with all 8 members of the house, ultimately getting 4 or 5 of them to move into a 1-bedroom apartment in the city with him. And then years of this psychological abuse and kind of Stockholmy stuff happens. And
It's bonkers.
the point of me bringing it up and why I wish you had seen it is it's a really, really acute look at how fragile the human psyche is. Like, I think way more than any of us would ever want to believe how someone can be broken.
Yeah. There's a line, I think it's from the Joker, the graphic novels, something to the effect of, in a day, somebody could be transformed and lose all of their humanity, become a monster. And maybe it's not a day, but where we are in a sense more fragile than we think we are.
Yeah, this is kind of pretty well documented, right? We think our identity is cast in concrete or something, but tell us about some of the factors that might shock us and how easily this happens.
Maybe one of the most famous psychology experiments is the one by Stanley Milgram. Took place at Yale, where I used to be, where he got these people to come in and said, you're going to do a learning experiment. And there's another guy in the room. You get to meet him, shake hands with him, nice big Irish guy. And then if he makes a mistake, you got to give him a little shock.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, this is a good one.
You've heard it. So the shocks keep going up, right? Ultimately, what Milgram found was that just by being instructed, these guys come off the street, they end up killing the guy. They end up believing they killed the guy. He screams, he begs for mercy. The people say, can I leave? Can I stop? The experiment says, experiment must go on. The point is, I ask intro psych students all the time, what would you do? And they all say, oh, I wouldn't go on. I wouldn't shock the person. I'd be the exception. You ask people, you're white, what would you have thought of slavery? And they say, well, I would have been against it. We have no conception of how we can be influenced, often for the worst, by forces. We probably are not the people who would rise up against Hitler. We probably were the people who would just do what we're told.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know. It's such a bummer.
I know people hate when I point this out. And by the way, I employ lots of Latino workers. So I'm not claiming to be holier than thou or self-righteous. I'm simply asking the question to family and friends. Do you think in 100 years from now, when they look back at Los Angeles and they just say the simple statement, brown people did manual labor and white people didn't? How do you think the future is going to judge that? Like, do you think the explanation we currently have is going to hold up in 100 years? It really ignites them. They're really angry when I make this point. Well, that's better than they had in Guam. And I'm like, yeah, that's what slave owners said. It was better than the jungle they pulled them from.
You're right. It's weird, isn't it? Because we could ask each other, what do we do now that 100 years from now they're going to say are horrible? Like our prisons, the savagery towards non-human animals, not just that we eat them, but the tortures we put them through. And people like me say, oh man, 100 years from now, they're going to say, it was monstrous. How did they do it? And then tonight I'm going to eat a steak.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Me too. I'm not claiming to be above it. Just, I bet it's not going to look great.
Yeah.
Yeah. we live with these hypocrisies. That's no excuse. Maybe we should live a lot better. I'm really into, we talked about this last time, into the idea of rationality and how smart we are and how we're able to come to moral insights. But often when push comes to shove, we do what everyone else does.
Yeah.
Everyone else I know eats meat. Everyone else employs people from other countries. You do it. No one's yelling at you for doing it, so you do it.
I almost think it's evolutionary because if you're the one, you're at risk of getting kicked out of the group if you're the one always calling people out.
Challenging the agreed upon system.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I have a part of my book where I talk about conspiracy theories and people who believe crazy things. And I say, it's not necessarily irrational to believe crazy things because we're social creatures. So if everybody around me thinks global warming is a hoax, well, if I don't want to lose all my friends, if I don't want to be a pariah, then exactly what you're saying, Monica, it makes sense at a certain level for me to say global warming is a hoax and believe it. Now my life is so much better. Nobody wants to be an outcast.
This gets me to my last question, but I don't mind going there
Oh,
first.
wow.
Yeah, this already landed me at the very last one. But just in a nutshell, Psych, the story of the human mind, you've taken what was one of the most popular courses of all time at Yale, your intro to psychology class, and you've kind of put it down in book form with more stuff, I'm sure, than was in that class.
A little more stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But in general, that is the conceit of the book. There's so many wonderful topics in it. But my last question was going to be, if you had to identify the single most powerful force that explains our behavior, as you might guess, I have one. But I'm curious if you do have the single most powerful, because I think we were just dancing around it.
Yeah. I think the single most important force is our capacity for reason. This is how come I'm in Toronto, you're in California. We have these machines, we're communicating. We have laws, we have rights, we have societies. It's what shapes the world. It's what makes humans so transcendently special. I think that's the most important. The most powerful force, I think, is our emotions, and particularly our social emotions. Gratitude, shame, guilt, romantic love, sexual love, parental love. I think they drive us in powerful ways. So what would you put first?
Well, I guess it works in concert with that, because I would say under that, those emotions, those are all adaptive things to facilitate social cohesion. I think that we're social primates. And as much as we look at dogs and we're like, oh, I can predict everything a dog's going to do because they have a pack mentality. I can get them to do this or that. We accept that. And I think for some reason we think we have transcended that. And I think we live in this very precarious time where it's like we have transcended the need for a group, but our bodies know it's life or death.
That's right.
Right? As a species, we know we have got to be in concert with our peers or we'll be excluded and we'll die in the jungle. And I think that force is so powerful and completely ignored. And or we live in a technological time where you don't need one. So it's this weird paradox.
A lot of people pointed out that we sort of have these Stone Age minds that have evolved for tribal living. And now we're stuck in a world with Facebook and Twitter and superhighways and billions of people. There's such a clash. I remember the first time I ever published an article was on Slate. And so it was about, are atheists better people or worse people? And I said, that's complicated. I look at the comments, and the very first comment was, all in caps, you are a dumbass. So the fact that I'm telling you this story so many years later says, what? And so I immediately said, I'm not a dumbass. Smarter people said, don't do this. You're an idiot. Don't read the comments. But here's the thing. Back in a world where we lived in a tribe of 30 people, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, somebody who thought I was a dumbass, that is serious business. This person's going to be living me day by day. It makes total sense to be taken seriously. But that part of the brain hasn't shut down.
Right.
Yeah.
So a stranger says something to you, some jerk cuts you off. You Google yourself and you find some awful thing. The most reasonable thing is to say, doesn't matter. But our minds go back to a different time where it did matter and we think it matters now.
When we are confronted with that we responded to someone who called us a dumbass, I think conventionally you accuse the person of just vanity, right? Like, oh, get over your vanity. And I think it kind of discounts the actual force that's happening and how it is existential. And it's okay that that was your response. I mean, of course, we want to have tools, but what's curious to me is how we don't have a better set of tools that is known by all to address this huge force in our lives.
Yeah. And you're right. It's not vanity. I think the only people who don't care what other people think about them are either psychopaths or saints. And As long as you're just a person, you care what people think about you. I mean, it's critical. It's like caring whether you have food and water. People try to do other systems. There's Buddhism. It's a system which recognizes that everything is suffering and intransient and don't get too attached. There's Stoicism. We try to construct systems that are ways to get our minds to say, don't take it so seriously. But it's hard.
Yeah. To me, I always just see it like the antidote is shaming the person for having been self-centered or vain. And I just think, well, that's just incomplete. It doesn't give full credit to the force at work. Okay. Another thing I figured out while going through your book was, did you just love Behave by Sapolsky?
Yeah, excellent book.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the one that I realized. The Weirdest People on the Planet's the one that you quote quite often in the book.
I do, by Joe Henrich.
Yes, that book just absolutely blew my mind. I'm sure you were already aware of all these principles, but did even you find yourself reading it really feeling peculiar about us in the West?
Yeah. In fact, I edited a journal, Behavioral Brain Science, where he and his colleagues first coined the term weird, which is Western educated, industrialized, rich democracies. And their line was, so much of psychology, all the work I do, studied this fairly narrow population. And this is the population we live in, where we're rich, we're Western, we're educated. But most of the world isn't like that. And of course, most of the world is never like that. So what Henrich and that bunch argue is that we're studying the psychology of fairly unusual people. And in his book, he points at all different ways which we are unusual. We're very individualistic, while other societies tend to be more collectivist.
Yeah, even the practical way when he points out, like if you were to ask someone from, I don't know, North Korea to tell you about themselves, they would mention who their parents are, their siblings are, what village they're from. The list would be quite long before they said, I'm an economist. That I could look at and go like, oh yeah, that's quite clear. The piece that you took from Weirdest People in the World, or one of them, was in getting into social psychology and maybe a bit of a crisis that we're in, which I couldn't be happier that you've dedicated some time in your book to. So this is the little section from Weirdest People in the World. A randomly selected American undergraduate is more than 4,000 times more likely to be a research participant than is a randomly selected person from outside of the West.
Yeah, that's rough.
My book is like a celebration of psychology. This is what we know. This is some great findings. Some of the findings we have about memory, for instance, I think are really important and really deep. But at the same time, our field is in a big crisis. You put your finger on one aspect of it, which is the weird problem. We claim to be studying the whole world, but we're studying this narrow part. Another part, which I talk about, is a lot of our findings. A lot of them don't replicate. A lot of them can't be trusted. So what I want to do in my book, among other things, is to celebrate psychology, but also tell people you got to be skeptical of a lot of it.
Yeah, you say one project looking at 100 psychology studies published in top journals found that only about 40% of the replications got significant results. But yeah, that of 100 in top journals, only 40% could be replicated. Seems really dangerous because you must see it. We see it because we're in this business where someone has a cool finding. It's a headline in the news. Someone writes an article about it, and then it comes across our desk. It almost launches this rivulet, which just then people hop on with their opinions, and you just watch it take off. And it just takes up all the space for 6 months or so. And you just wonder, like, boy, I hope that finding was right or consistent in other areas. It's just deeply concerning.
I have a rule about how to think about this, which is never, ever, ever believe in a single finding. Just say, okay, somebody found it. Wait until there's finding after finding after finding after finding after finding. And then when you get all that, then change your mind. Single finding, say, because there's all sorts of ways a single finding may not be representative. So there's stuff like, if I told you that social connections make people happy, you could take that to the bank because there's literally hundreds of studies showing it in all sorts of ways. If I tell you, standing on your head for 10 minutes every morning makes you happy because some guy found it, well, whatever. Just wait till that's confirmed.
Yeah. So even when you say the social connections is powerful, I go straight to, at some point, somebody wrote in one of their papers that you'll die earlier of loneliness more than you would if you were a smoker.
That's actually right. Apparently, loneliness is worse than smoking and obesity.
Now, that's terrible, but you got to wonder who did that calculus. And that one really took flight because it's a good story. Someone stumbled upon a great analogy or anecdote.
But this is demoralizing because what do you believe? And life is boring if all these articles are not real.
Is the meta-analysis one of the tools we have?
Yeah. So a meta-analysis is when you take a bunch of studies, like 100 studies or 500, and you put them together and you see what the broad story is. And I think they're really powerful tools. But There's kind of a garbage in, garbage out problem where if the studies are manipulated in well-intentioned ways to get good results, lousy sample sizes, poorly done studies, if you put in a lot of crap, your meta-analysis will give you crap. It can't do better than individual studies. There's no substitute for doing things right. But I want to sort of defend my field. We're talking about negatives.
Yeah.
We do have really robust findings, sometimes because they're done by big studies. So some of the happiness studies are done with over 1 million people. And you do all of these analyses and very powerful findings. Sometimes because there's convincing experiments after experiments after experiments. So one thing I talk in my book is about memory. One of the findings that's really important and is sort of solid is the reconstructive nature of memory. There's a folk view that when you live in the world, you record things, like you're holding up your iPhone and it's just recording, and you have a full recording in your head. It can hypnotize you, you get it back, go through therapy, you get it back. And psychologists think, and I think we're right to think this, it's just not true.
Example in your book is like a guy in a crime novel hypnotizing a guy and telling him to hit rewind on he's like now using his brain as a VCR.
That's right. So it's Michael Connolly, these guys who did the Hieronymus Bosch series. He has a scene where this guy's a witness and he hypnotized him. He says, okay, so play it back. Keep playing it back and then freeze it on the license plate. Zoom in. That's not how memory works. If you can't remember something from the past and I hypnotize you or your therapist gets at you, you'll make stuff up. There's so many evidence you could reconstruct the story. What's worse is, and this is some really good stuff by Elizabeth Loftus, is asking people questions can shape their memories of the past. So typical studies show you a movie of some event, and I'd say, hey, did you see the school bus? You say, no. And they would ask you, are you sure you didn't see it? And then later on, I ask you to describe the event, and poof, there's a school bus in it.
This is like false confession stuff where they're like sort of implanting.
So what Loftus did in one of her studies was she implanted false memories in people. It's inception. And there's sort of moral reasons why you don't want to put something to somebody's head that they committed a murder or raped somebody or was a victim of terrible crime. But she had this story, for instance, where he said, when you were a kid, you went to a wedding and you spilled punch all over the bride's mother. Never happened. But you ask people the questions, and for some people, not everybody, a little while later, they remember it.
Oh, my God.
Is there an ethical way that a therapist might implant some counter memories to help you? I guess you could make a moral argument that maybe some false positive memories could get you in the loop. In the book, you're saying this memories are most accessible. Like one example you give is like if you study a little buzzed, you'll probably do better if you take the test a little buzzed. If you're sad, all of a sudden your recollection of memories of other times you've been sad are very salient.
Yeah.
And then conversely, if you're happy, so to me, when you find out that's an aspect of it, then it seems a little self-perpetuating. So if one can get themselves in a happy state, then they're going to be remembering more happy states and so on. So would it maybe be ethical for a therapist to implant some happy?
Wow. You go to the therapist, you say, I've had a terrible childhood. Can you fix that for me?
Yes.
Can I have like a happy childhood memories and everything? Maybe happy couples do this where you're lying in bed with your partner and you're talking, you're going over some event in the past. And if you're happy, you're in a good relationship, you don't go over the bad events. You don't go over the fights, the periods of boredom, the sadness. You say, hey, remember when that happened?
Yeah.
And pretty soon, your head starts to fill itself to positive things and negative things go away. When I lived in New Haven, we had on our wall going up the stairs pictures of our kids and all doing happy stuff with our kids, in a swimming pool on vacation, the kids cracking up, great pictures of all of us. And I'd always look at the pictures going up and down. And I think because of that, all my memories of my kids when they were kids are happy because they're all the pictures.
Yeah, you never say grab the camera when the kid's bawling.
That's right. Remember when the kid had explosive diarrhea? We have pictures of the room.
Yeah. The data set's totally skewed. You're only documenting certain types of times.
But you're pointing out that maybe sometimes if you consent to it, fiddling with your memories could be a good thing. I think we naturally do that a little bit. Even something as benign as trying to think of the good stuff.
Yeah.
God, you're making me think of, I get a text from my sister-in-law. It's like, don't listen to that message. I butt dialed you. So naturally, I've got to immediately listen to this message. And it was adorable. They were outside talking and they were my brother was saying, yeah, well, where you really crushes when you went to the other job and you said this and blah, blah, blah.
Aww.
I was listening to them talk. It was really interesting because I was just like a fly on the wall. And I guess I was seeing a little bit of mirror how I do that too in my relationship. They were just taking this time to go over the past and kind of compliment each other on the moves that happened and that they were grateful for where they were at in life. I think probably they were embarrassed because I guess from the outside, you could say it was bragging, but I, of course, just identified with how nurturing this was to one another, and it was quite sweet.
That's incredibly sweet.
Yeah, I liked it.
And it's not just memories, it's the person you are. So if you're in a loving relationship, that person will bring out in you the very best parts and see the best part of you. And who's to say that they're wrong? Like, we do have a best part.
I had read your memory chapter, and so even you saying that someone wrote dumbass is very telling. That's a huge clue. There was probably 30 plus positive comments that you have no idea what they were. And then we kind of get into the biochemical nature of your brain. You're getting a stronger signal. Can you tell us what's happening biochemically with negative and positive?
One of the findings, this is an unfortunate thing going against what we're talking about, is humans possess a negativity bias. The negative is more powerful than the positive. This makes total sense. Think of the worst thing that could happen to you right now. Your phone ring, the worst thing. Now think of the best thing that could happen to you. The worst thing is much worse than the good thing is good.
Yeah.
True.
I think, what are you going to do? Like, oh, somebody's in love with you. You won $1 billion. You won a big prize. That's really nice. The worst thing, I can't even say what the worst thing would be. And there's an evolutionary logic to this because you want to really be on guard for badness. It's really more important to know whether the person in a room with you is going to kill you versus they're going to be really nice to you. Because if you miss out on one, the niceness, too bad. But if you miss out on the danger, it's really important. And this shows up in memory. So you're exactly right. I remember that dumbass comment. I'm a professor. You get student evaluations. And it's a teach okay course, so I get a lot of nice things to say. But I could read you back from memory every nasty, mean comment.
Yes. Do you think maybe the bias is logical and reasonable in that, don't you think there is a natural asymmetry between elation and agony? Elation doesn't actually exist. So when you say like win $1 billion, I think people have a fantasy of what that is and they can imagine elation. But I've ended up getting way more than I ever thought. And I had a fantasy that I achieved and there was no accompanying elation. So elation is very limited supply on planet Earth, but agony and suffering is very real.
You can have chronic pain and terrible things happen to you, and it's just terrible. And the terribleness doesn't really go away. But then for good things, they call it hedonic treadmill. For good things, you get used to them. Wow, I have a lot of money. It'd be nicer if I had more.
Right.
Yes.
I had this success, but now I haven't had a success in a while. And we're constantly frustrated. And so you're right. The good things are not as good as the bad things are bad.
And no one's ever been diagnosed with chronic euphoria. You hear about chronic
my
pain all the
God.
time. I've never heard of the case of chronic
What a
euphoria.
great disease.
Yeah, like, oh my God. Doctor, I'm just titillated at all times.
Do you have anything on repressed memories? Are they real?
I don't think they're real. There was such a big talk about them and so much emphasis. This sort of satanic panic 30 years ago, maybe, where psychiatrists got children to say, oh, they were molested by their parents, but they didn't know it. And it came back through hypnosis and through stuff, and also satanic rituals and cannibalism and so on. Sometimes bad things happen to us, sometimes really bad things, and we simply forget about them because we try not to think about them. And sometimes we get to remember them back. But the idea of a force of repression, where something bad happens to you and systems in the head shut it down and submerge it, doesn't seem to exist. If anything, when bad things happen to us, we tend to think about them too much. You take somebody who had trauma, and they don't say, oh, it's disappearing from my head. It's so magical. What they say is, I can't stop thinking about the damn thing. I want to shut it off somehow. I don't think repressed memories do exist in that sense.
Oh, wow. That's a big one. I mean, I even know someone who it came to him later in life that his father had molested him his whole life. That might have been more a willingness to actually say it more than it was didn't exist.
Right. So it's good to be careful about these things. One thing is, you could genuinely forget something. Maybe something which should be very significant to you as an adult. But when you were a kid, it wasn't that significant. And in an adult, you think back, oh my God, that was really serious. That was really wrong. So that could happen. You could also think about things in a different way. A kid might think, oh, this is a natural way for my uncle, my aunt, my mother, my father to treat me. And then realize, hey, that wasn't right at all. That's messed up. And then rethink it in a different way. But what doesn't happen is you have these histories of horrific abuse and you just wipe it from your head and think it never happened. And then boom, you see a therapist and then it pops back. I don't want to say things never happen. There's always like 1 in a million things. But the idea that this is a psychological process, it doesn't meet with common sense. We all as adults have really bad things happen to us. our first instinct isn't to wipe them from our head. Again, it's to think about them too much.
Oh, yeah, to ruminate on them.
I still remember the dumbass comments. And there's stuff a lot more sitting around in my head.
If I whisper in your ear on your deathbed, if I'm lucky enough to do so, what was the first comment you read? You'll be with you to the day you die.
It was all in caps.
Well, can I share with you this experience I've been having with memory, which is I've been trying to write about my childhood, and I stumbled upon one really cool technique, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about what I'm harnessing, which was if you had asked me to tell you all the stories about my neighborhood, I maybe off the top of my head could have come up with 7 or 8 or whatever it is. The conceit of it was I'm leaving my driveway on a bike ride with my family. So in my mind, I leave my driveway and it's like, oh, I immediately see the Bowden's house across the street. And then I know about 10 stories about them. And then I get to the next house. Oh, that guy had a fish, a gar, and it bit his finger. If I travel in my mind through the physical space, hippocampus on campus, you taught me that.
There we go. Very good.
Yeah. That's a trick to remember what your hippocampus is for, spatial relation.
You really read my book. I appreciate this a lot. It just came out.
I've done the best I can. I'm not going to claim to have read every word of it. But listen, the hippocampus is on your campus. So if I travel through my neighborhood, all of a sudden these stories just start popping up. So that's one cool thing I discovered. And I had advised other people who are writing to put themselves in a physical space and take a walk. What's happening there?
Associations. You walk back to your old school. You haven't been there for many years. Some memories can come flooding back. Sometimes people, when they open up a yearbook, oh, that guy, that club I was part of, and things start coming back.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Okay, so now here's where I found like a little red flag went up in my head, which is I get to the beach. I have now dialogue between my mom and my brother and myself. Now, that's impossible. No way do I remember a verbatim conversation from the time I was 7 years old. But what's tricky about memory is I know how my mom talks. I know how my brother talks. So I actually can recreate that conversation with extreme confidence, even fooling myself, because I know what my mother would say and I know what my brother said and I know their patterns. I'm aware of it because I'm actually writing it down and I'm putting quotes. But were I not in that exercise, I wonder how much of my memory I've done exactly that. I know something about the present I apply to this past.
You're unusually honest about the process. Most people would say, oh my God, I have a perfect memory of this dialogue 10 years ago, which is impossible. So acknowledge it. Say, this is a reconstruction. I know there was a conversation of some sort. Of course, I'm not going to remember the words back and forth. You're not going to remember the words back and forth of a conversation an hour ago, let alone here. But this is how they talk. This is what they would have said. You may be writing the one honest autobiographical book in history where you say all of these stories are false.
Yeah.
Every story is false because memory doesn't work that way. And if I ask someone else who was stereotyping it, but I'm going to give you my best reconstruction. And this reconstruction will not only tell you about my past, it'll tell you about my present.
Yeah, what I want to say as a forward is like, I'm going to tell you the story of my life as it is in my head. This is the story I believe. That's my commitment. I believe the story, but there's no factual basis for it. It's just the story I'm telling myself.
What drives me nuts is, so somebody says something about happened a couple years ago and there's a huge scandal because they get some facts wrong. Getting facts, it's just the norm.
Yeah.
Yes.
After 9/11 happened, I was at Yale and I had colleagues who studied memory. So they did something immediately. They asked people, where were you when the planes hit? Then went back to them many years later and said, where were you when the planes hit? And the people said, I know exactly, tell the story. Different stories.
Yeah.
9/11 is a funny case because people often talk about and tell stories about where they were when planes hit. They start remembering their stories. I say in my book, I once was at a party and I said this really funny thing that happened to me. And then after the party, driving home, my wife was nice enough to say, you know, that actually happened to me.
Oh, to happen to your wife.
But also, who's right?
There's a story kind of in my head.
Maybe she's wrong.
That didn't occur to me. Maybe she was wrong.
Now, have you had that weird moment where it's like you already have dedicated your life to psychology, you understand it from its origins to the clinical practice of it, all these aspects, and then you have your real anecdotal life where I imagine things become incredibly clear to you. And I wonder if raising kids for you, that's another red flag for me, is I've now observed my children telling stories about themselves as if they're memories, but I know they're retelling the story we have been telling them about themselves. The family lore is being passed on. And I now hear them out in the world sharing it as if they actually remember it. And of course, once you observe that, you go, well, fuck, what percentage of my stories are my mother's recounting them to me? How trustworthy is she as a narrator? Oh my God, this whole thing's a house of cards.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a generational aspect of history and a generational aspect of how people think of themselves. So how much of the way I think I am as a person is shaped by how my parents thought I was and my kids. My book came out today and both my sons call me. They're both adults now. They're very sweet to talk to them. And I often think about what influence I had on them and what I didn't have on them. I talk in the book about there's a substantial role of the genes in shaping how we become, and also a substantial role of accident. You get sick on a day of a big exam. You have a torrid romantic affair while on vacation. You get picked on by a bully. And these chance events, not the genes, not the parenting, shape us a lot.
Yeah, you can't plan for those. You can't manipulate those.
When you have kids, I think everybody comes to appreciate how much chance comes in, how much randomness.
It's also really interesting to think about as a parent, the stories that you do choose to tell. If you're always telling stories about when the kid fucked up or spilled something, then that does infiltrate the way they will see themselves. Oh, I'm a person who does this.
That's right. And you know, when you see it, it's not clear how much people take that into the world. But when they get back together with their parents or their families, Yeah, I've seen people who are confident, tough, ambitious, charming people. I've seen them with their families, with their parents, and they go back to being submissive, shy, because that's how the parents see them. We take different roles depending on who you're with. That's sort of common sense. But there's a sense in which we're different selves, and the self we are when we're with the people who raised us is a very different self.
I couldn't identify with that more. In every family reunion, I, by the end of it, am exhausted with the role I played as a middle child, as I was the peacemaker. And I'm so hyper-focused on everyone's temperament at all times and who needs regulating. And I got to prevent this from all exploding. And by the end of a Christmas break, I'm like, fuck, I don't want to be the middle child at all.
Yeah. And the inside of psychology is you go in the real world, you're not necessarily middle child, man. But when you get back home, it clicks into place.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to go kind of chronologically. So this was all upside down, but I want to say your book, because it was based on your intro to psychology class, we learned the history, we learned how the brain actually works. And the first thing I want to talk about, Freud is, commonly a laughing stock now. You point out that you're actually probably never going to hear a theory of Freud's as a psychology major. You're more likely to bump into it as a literature major or something. Let's own some shit about Freud, but then let's talk about some stuff that maybe was worth remembering.
I own that shit. Freud was, in his personal life, his interactions, often a terrible man. Viciously ambitious, often incredibly cruel to people. Narcissistic.
Cocaine addict. That's relevant.
Though very productive. I don't want to make a commercial for cocaine. But
Look, I was a user for 10 years and I did a lot of stuff. Trust me.
I think his real problem was cigar addict, which killed him. Got cancer in the mouth. And even to the very end, refused to give up cigars. So crazy character. Some of his views are insane. It's saying that every girl gets penis envy because she notes that her father has a penis and her brother might have a penis. She has no penis. And this messes her up dramatically. The idea that every boy in development decides he wants to sleep with his mother in some amorphous sense, the Oedipus complex. Then comes the conclusion, oh no, my dad's going to get back at me. What my dad's going to do is going to chop off my penis. And all of a sudden that shapes everyone, no exceptions. The idea that parental separation makes a boy homosexual. The idea that one of the most significant events in a developing kid's life is the primal scene. The primal scene is when the kid sees or fantasizes about his parents having sex. And this all sounds crazy because it kind of is crazy. There's no evidence for any of this. Oral stage, anal stage, it gets complicated and not very good science. So that's the case against Freud. I'll say three things in favor of Freud. One is he's a great writer and a brilliant person. You read, I recommend Civilization and its Discontents, just full of good ideas. The second thing is, although he was very odd about sex, he had in some ways a very liberal attitude. Not everybody had really weird, perverted desires. And because of that, there was more sympathy for people, like at the time, like gay people, who really did have unconventional desires. So, the line I say is something like, if everybody's a pervert and nobody is a pervert,
Yeah.
And Freud was also open to the idea of female sexual desire, something very forbidden at the time.
Yeah, it was seen as hysteria back then, right? Like if they were horny, they were hysterical.
Yeah, his explanation of hysteria often involved tremendous female desire for better lovers, for satisfaction. The main thing I'm in favor of Freud is Freud did not invent the idea of the unconscious. This was around long before, but Freud ran with it. Freud really had an articulated theory of the mind about the powers of the unconscious mind, arguing that I ask you why you two have a podcast, and you'll tell me some sort of story. Well, it was interesting. I like this. I get this out of it. And Freud would say, that's your story. You might be wrong. You might be doing the podcast for entirely different reasons. Why do you have the romantic partners you have? Why do you have the friends you have, the enemies you have? Well, you answer that. Freud says, you don't know what's going on in your head. And of all the insights, this one's lasted.
Yeah.
That's humility. And it's so relevant. We talk more about the story than any other concept, I think, on this show and with other guests we have. And it's so real, your story. And then now we have some more tools that have been confirmed by random controlled trials, which is we have confirmation bias. So if our story is your wife is cold to you, you will only see the coldness at the exclusion of all the warmness. Like we know now the mechanisms by which the story plays out. But he fundamentally had that right.
Yeah, he had the idea that these are stories that we construct and that real motivations might be hidden to us. And I think that that's a real insight. Other people had it before, but he really built on it. And now we live in a world where psychologists could say, suppose you want to know why people voted for Trump or voted for Biden. Well, one way is ask them. It's not bad. You get some idea. But psychologists, I think we're right to say, even if people answer honestly, you can't necessarily take their word for it. They might do it for reasons they don't know about. And this is an insight which pervades our everyday life. Sometimes I'm talking to people say, how did you become a psychologist? Yeah, of course, I have to say blah, 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 blah. And I tell the story. I don't know if it's true.
Right. You've just been telling it for so long now.
Yeah, that's right. There's a great scene. I think it's in The Dark Knight. This is the second time I mentioned the Joker.
Yeah, people are going to think you're at Comic-Con when
Maybe
you're not doing
your flamboyance.
studies.
But he says, you want to know how I got these scars? And he tells the story. And it's a very moving story. But then he encounters Jim and says, you want to know how I got these scars?
Yes.
And it says a totally different story.
So creepy.
And it's so chilling.
Yes.
But it's also an insight. These are just stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Okay, now you give Freud a little moment in the sun. I appreciate it. And I think it's crazy, yeah, that he wouldn't be some significant part of the initial education in psychology. But you also attack some widely accepted theories in the field that are probably wrong. So what are some that probably everyone has kind of taken on as some kind of social science fact that probably is not right?
So one of them is the idea that memory is a direct recording. I think another thing that we get wrong is that babies are blank slates, that babies start off knowing nothing.
Oh.
It makes so much sense. You look at a baby and you think the baby doesn't know anything, can't talk. But there's these real brilliant studies, and I spent some time talking about them, where you find that, and this is an idea from Plato, from Immanuel Kant, also from Chomsky, who's still around, the noted linguist, that a lot of the knowledge of the world is pre-wired. Very clever studies find that babies understand how physical objects move through space. They understand math. 1 + 1 = 2, 3 - 1 = 2, that sort of thing. They understand people. So I did some work where you show these 9-month-olds, one-act plays where a character is trying to help another character up the hill or pushing it down. And what you find is that the youngest babies you test like the good guy,
Oh my
the one who
God.
helps, and don't like the bad guy.
Wow.
So that's one.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one more that people have, which is people think that there's an enormous role of parenting on your personality. What your parents do to you make you an extrovert, make you an introvert, make you smart, make you stupid. And there's definitely some role, but it's nowhere near as much as people think it is. Again, it's back to the stories. I asked somebody, how come you're such an extrovert? Like, where did that come from? They said, oh, because my mom and dad did this and mom and dad did that. The best evidence we have suggests that something like this has a lot to do with your genes, a lot to do with your life experience. Parenting doesn't matter in shaping personality as much as people think it does.
Interesting.
Okay, again, it kind of circles back to the maybe just great advice is like some humility. So I'll give you the one that combines what we were just talking about, story, and then this genetics thing. So I have always been frugal. I've always been great with money, Paul. No matter what I made, I saved at least half. So proud of that. And if you ask me why, I would tell you, oh, my father filed bankruptcy twice. We were in a state of financial insecurity all the time and blah, blah, blah. I have 2 daughters. They've both grown up in way too much privilege. And one of them, if you give her $10, she spends 15, like my wife does. And then the other one has saved every penny she's ever been given. And I look at that and I go, oh, I was genetically a hoarder of resources. Like I didn't do anything. I didn't compensate or react to anything. I was born this way. She's born this way. This is not a feather in my cap.
Yeah.
It's pretty disappointing because the story is I've adapted.
People say that anybody who has more than one kid realizes how little parenting matters in some way. So I have 2 sons and they're both terrific kids and they get along very well. But in some ways they're as different as can be. They're both super smart, but one went to Harvard Law School and very scholarly and everything. The other one is also super sharp, philosophy degree, but loves to be outside. When he called me, he's telling me that he went skiing with a friend on a ski trip and they kind of got lost. So they spent overnight skiing, trying to find their way back home. And he has frostbite and everything.
Oh, my God.
And me, I go on a bunny hill.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Yeah. You certainly didn't teach him that.
I did not teach him that. Some crazy roll of the dice genes. And some people hear this and say, well, if I don't influence my kid that much, isn't that bad news? And I don't think it is. I think we should love our kids and support them and let them thrive and get over ourselves in some way. We're not molding them.
Yeah, I mean, the nature-nurture thing becomes a really powerful debate when you have kids because you want to believe you're having a great impact on them. You're certainly putting in a lot of effort, making a lot of sacrifices. So you want to believe it's not for naught. We watched that great documentary. I don't know if you saw 3 Identical Strangers. Did you see that?
What a documentary. I loved it.
Yes.
Loved it.
Right. And then the first half of it, you're like, oh, it doesn't matter what you do. They smoke the same cigarettes. They went to the same school. But come to find out, no, one of them committed suicide. There's this huge gap in how they all turned out. And so you're also really confirmed that nurture is a huge part of it.
That's right. Or at least environment, what happens to them. So identical twins or triplets are so amazing to study because they turn to be so much alike, even when separated at birth, an amazingly weird event. But then they're not perfectly alike. If it was only genes, identical genes grow up to be basically the same person, and they don't. They diverge. So something else is happening.
Yeah, and it lays in perfectly with the confirmation biases. When people start studying these separated twins or triplets, their first curiosity is the similarities. That's the most exciting thing. Our story brains, that's the headline. They're just ignoring the trillions of things that are not similar.
That's right. You got to do careful studies where you ahead of time, you sort of neutrally observe. In a very small bit, it's an example problem that pervades all of psychology, which is you have a theory, you look for confirmation for it, and you ignore what doesn't fit into it.
Yeah. Okay, so is there really such thing as right brain people and left brain people?
No. No.
Oh,
That's another psychology.
I've prided myself on being right brain. Tell me, Paul.
Well, you're good with language, though. That's left brain.
I'm left-handed. Is it my right brain is controlling my left hand and I'm creative?
Your right brain is controlling your left hand, but the 2 halves of the brain are somewhat specialized. So language is not always, but typically in the left side of the brain. So if you have brain surgery on the left side, you can be very careful not to cut into that part. Sometimes creativity and face recognition is in your right side. Are you good with faces?
Yeah. Maybe too good.
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, I see other actors and other actors all the time. You don't happen to watch Stranger Things, do you?
I've seen some Stranger Things.
Okay, well, you know the lead of it, Millie Bobby Brown. And then do you know the actor Tom Wilkinson? You might
He's not in Stranger Things.
You might remember him from my very favorite movie, Michael Clayton. He's the one having a psychotic break.
That guy's great.
Oh, he's just one of the best performances of all time. I've never seen 2 people look more identical, yet one's male, one's female, and they're separated by 50 ages. By God, they're the same person.
I can see it.
It was when he said that the 3 of us were watching, and Kristen and I were like, "What are you talking about?" But then we did a side by side.
We put them next to each other in a frame.
It was pretty good. Well, we have a friend, David, who can't recognize faces.
He has a facial recognition issue. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
I got a bit of that. I got prosopagnosia, not clinical, but sometimes I have problems when it's out of context.
Yes, that's his thing.
So how do we debunk the left brain, right brain thing?
So people have clusters of abilities. Some people are really good at language. Some people are really good at face recognition, bad at face recognition. Some people are good at math, good at art. But it doesn't cluster. It's not like some people for this half of the brain, they're just really good. And for this half, they're down. There's no sense in which some people are all the right side, they're really good, and all the left side, they're bad, or vice versa. It's just different abilities.
It's not like someone has like 2 standard deviations above on the right and 2 below on the left.
That's right. Left brain and right brain are one thing that went away. Also learning styles. It's a convenient way of talking. Some people like this and some people like that. But the idea of these clearly delineated learning styles.
Like visual.
Wait, go into that.
Or
I'm
audio.
not sure. I don't know the stereotypes.
I think some people are supposed to be visual learners,
Oh.
so you show them pictures to do better. But some people are verbal learners, so you tell them stories. It doesn't go much beyond that.
So I'm dyslexic and I'm left-handed. To me, common sense says, oh, this makes sense. I'm neither side dominant. That's the fucking problem.
The neuroscience dyslexia is really interesting. It's not something I know much about. A lot of people have problems with reading. And reading is interesting because reading is not something we're born with. So language is natural. Speech is natural. It's every society, everywhere. Reading is a modern human invention. And so we struggle with it. English is very challenging to use the reading system. There's better reading and writing systems than English. But there's so many people who are in your boat in one way or another who struggle with reading. It's a very unnatural activity. It's more of a miracle we could do it at all.
Well, this was a great chapter in Weirdest People on the Planet, which is when we learned to read and Martin Luther got these significant portions of the population to be literate, we actually gave up some stuff. It was a trade-off. Our facial recognition went down because that part of the brain dedicated to reading was taken up with that.
That's right. We built in what they call a letterbox in the head. Again, it's back to this point of humility, which is you might think the architecture of the brain, well, that's just something we're born with. But apparently, a lot of how the brain is structured has to do with experience and cultural experience. The invention of reading changed our brains in a profound way.
Yeah, the structure is so fluid of the brain. You look at stroke survivors who relocate whole sections.
Better to do it when you're young. A friend of mine, I think his niece, as a baby, had a full hemispherectomy. One hemisphere.
No.
Entirely cut away.
Oh
No.
my God.
And now if you see her, he says, I think it's like 14, 15 now, she's cognitively fine.
No.
If you're very young, the other parts of the brain take over. Now, if one of us would get a hemispherectomy, we'd be so screwed. It would be
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Well, you have a guy in your book, HM was his initials. I forget his real name.
Harry Mollison. They kept it anonymous till he died, but I think it's Mollison or something.
Yeah, so he had surgery to confront epilepsy, and they cut out just tons of his brain, and he was perpetually stuck in the present. We talked about this last time. I'm drawn to like kind of poking at these commonly held things. So living in the present seems so aspirational, right? It's Eckhart Tolle's work. It's all these people want you to live in the present as if you could achieve that, you'd achieve self-actualization. But explain the problems one has when they can only live in the present.
Well, HM literally only lived in the present. He couldn't form any new memories. You ever see the movie Memento?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's a very good depiction of that. You don't accumulate anything. So HM, this professor, Suzanne Corkin, who I knew from graduate school, would come visit him like every day. And every day he would introduce himself.
It's like 51st Dates.
Sure, that too.
It's
That-
exactly 50%. Drew Barrymore and
Adam
Sandler.
Sandler.
Yeah.
That movie was so sad.
yeah, she had to relearn every day of her life. The great discovery from HM, though, was they got him to play this game. You take a pen and you put it in front of a mirror and you have to draw something while just looking at the mirror, draw a shape like a star. It's really tough.
Yeah.
You're really slow. And each time he gave it to HM said, so what's this? So you had to explain it to him. But HM got better, even though he had no memory of getting better. And this was one of the great discoveries of neuroscience and psychology, which is that the part of the brain that stores, oh, I'm meeting you for the first time, hello, and so on, is separate from the part of the brain that learns motor skills.
Right, right.
And so HM illustrates it, but it's true for all of us. It just works differently. Learning how to ride a bike is different from the memories you're tapping for your autobiography.
Yes, and this is present in Alzheimer's patients who can play the piano,
Yes, that's right.
right? Because that's all stored in the fine motor control area, and they don't know why they know the song, but their brain can play it. That's so fascinating.
To some extent, we're all like that. If you know how to ride a bicycle, you hop on and you start riding. You don't know how you rode it. You can even forget you know how to ride it, but you just know how to ride it. And it's stored differently. I was talking to somebody who said to me, like, so how does thinking work? Which is kind of a good question, but I realized it's the wrong question to ask because how you learn to ride a bicycle is different from how you make a decision over what foods to eat, which is different from why you get jealous in some occasions. The brain has many parts and they all have their own story.
Yeah.
Why do we get jealous? I'm curious.
That's really interesting. There's been a lot of very controversial work on sex differences in jealousy. A very simple story, which I think has some truth to it, it's debatable, is that men are more struck by sexual jealousy. So you ask a man to imagine his partner, a heterosexual man, a female partner, having sex with another man. And even if she has no connection with that man, it's like a one-night stand. And often men find that very upsetting. Women find it upsetting to imagine their partner with another woman, but not as much if it's just sexual. Then you flip it. You ask both sexes, how would you feel if your partner was in a deep romantic relationship with somebody else, but not sex? There, women get more upset than men.
Anecdotally, I got to say, I've had lots of female friends that have been cheated on, lots of male friends, and the questions are 100% predictable. When the man's been cheated on, he'll ask the woman how big his dick was and did she come? It's the first two questions, 100% of the time. The woman's first question is not, did you come? Did she have nice breasts? It's, do you love her?
Yeah.
To me, what that says is like, oh, you learn a lot about our fears by those questions. Men walk around with this cloud over their head that their dick isn't big enough and that they're not good in bed. They're insufficient. They're insecure in those ways. And women walk around with this cloud that I'm not lovable.
So that's one way to see it, and that may be right. There's an evolutionary account here, which is for men, it's very important, since they want to be raising children who are their genetic children, that their partner is not having intercourse with another man. From a woman's point of view, they know their kids are their kids. There's never a worry about that. But there is a worry about losing their partner's care of their children.
Right. The resources that love is going to dictate.
I want to be cautious because a lot of people have been arguing about this for a long time, whether it's true. But I think that there's some truth to it. And I think the evolutionary story has some weight. I mean, the psychologies of men and women are different. This doesn't preclude the fact that it's individual differences. Men are on average taller than women. There's a lot of women taller than the average man, a lot of men shorter than the average woman. On average, men, if you ask them how many sexual partners you want to have before you die, they'll give you a bigger number than women. And this was done across dozens of different countries. It's done in Africa, it's done in South America, it's done in Asia, and always men give on average the bigger numbers. But you also find cultural differences, where in some countries, like some parts of like Eastern Europe, the numbers are very high. Everybody's giving a high number. In other places like Africa, actually, the numbers are fairly low. They're all giving you low numbers. So you see both cultural and individual differences.
Yeah, the nature-nurture thing is present around every corner, whether it's kids or us.
That's right. Somebody asks you, is it nature, is it nurture? Say yes. They both play a role. These are not incompatible. They could all exist in the same head. We're evolved creatures. We're also cultural creatures.
Well, since the theme of this conversation is somehow circling humility, I think another great part of the book is talking about that people generally think they are above average. There's great numbers. I don't know if you can remember them, but could you tell us how ubiquitous this is, that people do think they're above average and chess players think they're underrated? Like 70% of them think they're underrated. It's like astronomical.
It goes back to what you were saying before about wanting to nurture good memories, which is somehow it might be useful to have a better impression of yourself than is warranted. Sometimes it can be very harmful and get you in a lot of trouble. But in general, the above average effect is that we tend to enhance ourselves if we're psychologically healthy. So you ask people, how good are you as a friend? How good a driver are you? How good are you at chess? And people say better than average. But everybody can't be better than average.
Right.
Unless they're from Lake Wabigon.
That's right. You even ask people, do you think you're about average in being vulnerable to these biases? And they say, no, I'm above average. I'm not very vulnerable at all. Somebody I know, Ayla, who's on Twitter and is a researcher and studies sexuality, had this poll. Is your penis larger than average or smaller than average? Overwhelmingly, on an anonymous poll, people say larger than average. Everything you want to be better at, people say, I'm better than average.
What's the benefit and what's the consequence of that?
The benefit is that it might motivate us to try things and explore and take chances, where it's better to try and sometimes fail than not try and risk missing out on an opportunity. In fact, this has been studied for heterosexual men with women, which is heterosexual men tend overwhelmingly to think their chances are better than they are.
Oh,
Sure.
And now, from the standpoint of heterosexual women, this sucks.
Yes.
There's all these guys thinking like, hey, I see you're interested in me. I'm very sexy. Here's a picture of my penis, that sort of thing. But from the guy's point of view, from a cold-blooded point of view, the cost of rejection, that's kind of bad. But the benefit of success is great.
There's an inherent optimism that can keep one going forward.
And confidence.
That's right. If we were realists, we'd never go on a diet. We'd never try to recover from an addiction. We would never open up a business because the odds of failure are always high. But we're optimists, and then sometimes we succeed. You also asked me about the bad side of it, and there is a bad side of it. I have this quote from The Wire where somebody tries to kill Omar. And then he does this retaliation and he says, you shoot at the king, you best not miss. When it comes to confrontations, you don't really want to overestimate your chances if the cost of failure is disastrous. Then you want to underestimate it.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
It goes back to questions about the emotions and issues of fear and anxiety. This evolutionary psychologist, Randolph Nesse, has a really good discussion. He says, we always tell people with too much fear and anxiety. They end up going to psychiatrist's office. They end up taking pills. They end up reading self-help books. We never talk about people with too low anxiety. People with too low anxiety end up in prisons and morgues. If you're too fearless, obviously there's serious problems. Fear is useful. Anxiety is useful.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
I don't know if you heard the Dr. Death podcast. It was absolutely incredible. But this completely incompetent spinal cord surgeon in Texas at Baylor who decapitated people. So confident in his skills, terrible. You learn his history. He's the guy that he didn't make the football team, but I'll try hard enough. Tell me, coach, what do I need? Could never accept. He didn't have the prerequisite skills to do the things he wanted to do. So that's the downside.
You don't want an overconfident spinal surgeon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no thanks.
How does that track interculturally? That must vary in more collective societies.
That's a wonderful example of the Joe Henry point we were talking about earlier, where it varies a lot. You don't even have to go to exotic, non-Western cultures. Some cultures have a tall poppy syndrome, where the tall poppy gets chopped off. And I'm currently in Canada, which has a little bit of that compared to the States. You're in California. You don't have any tall poppy syndrome. The taller, the better.
That's right.
Yeah.
Keep trying, keep striving. But in some societies, if you make too much of yourself, you get punished. For those societies, it pays. And there we get nature and nurture again. You want to take anything, dial it down.
Okay, the one last thing we got to talk about. In truth, it was the chapter I didn't get to, but I do want to know about, is everybody a little racist, which is the cute, what play is that
Avenue
from?
Q.
Avenue Q. So that was a song in Avenue Q, right?
True story. The things began with all the lyrics of Avenue Q, and then my publisher apparently employs a lawyer. And the lawyer said, take that away unless you want to get sued by Avenue Q.
So is everyone a little bit racist? And what I did read, I thought I might have a counter thought, but tell us.
So boring answers depends what you mean by racist. There's kind of an awful aspect of ourselves where we're very groupish. We break the world in groups and out groups, us versus them. There's these studies where you put kids into different t-shirts, blue t-shirt, red t-shirt, plaid jumpsuit, not plaid jumpsuit. And then you find out that you prefer your own group. They want to give money to their own group, and their own group is better. Then when you get to real groups like black people and white people, Jews and Arabs, where there's real history and everything, there's a natural animosity towards the others. That's one part of it. Another part of it, what psychologists have long been interested in, is stereotypes. Stereotypes is kind of an evil word, but stereotypes just means you pick up information about the world. So you have a stereotype of Dutch people, that they're on average taller than Japanese people. You have a list of stereotypes in your head. Often they're true.
We have a bias to be categorical, too.
That's right. So that's part of the problem. If you then think, wow, all Jews are lawyers, all Asians are karate masters, then you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Then you're in a world of foolishness. But people often understand this. If I meet a gay person from New York, I might think Democrat. If I thought has to be Democrat, then I'm wrong. But we categorize people. And I think that degree of categorization, I think it's too harsh to say it's racism. I think it graduates to racism if you refuse to go beyond that.
Yes.
If you refuse to say, well, I have my stereotypes about people, and I'm not going to learn more about individuals. But often, many of us, not all of us, are willing to take individuals as individuals, say, these are the base rates. This gay NYU student from New York, if I had to assume right now, so he's liberal. But I get to know him better, maybe he's conservative.
I think what we're going to do, and you have a quote about this, is it's going to be a precarious time because we're going to be able to hide behind algorithms. So we as individuals can't say we are pretty good at guessing whether the person's a Democrat or not. But you have this one study found that a facial recognition algorithm tested on images of over 800,000 people on dating sites could predict political orientation at a ridiculously high rate of 72%. So I do think we're going to employ computers to say the things people aren't allowed to say. What do you think of that?
I think we are. There's big issues of algorithmic bias, so it comes under different names. And there are questions of truth here. Like, how accurate is it? And maybe it's pretty accurate. And then there's questions of morality. And the questions of morality often say, there's statistics here, but don't use them. I'm a psychology prof. I have a lot of graduate students. And typically, there's more graduates for developmental, more graduate students apply who are women than men. And I've had some really successful female graduate students. What if I say, I'm going to make the process simple. I'm just going to interview women. That's awful. You can't let statistics govern these choices, let alone people who'd say, I'm not going to look at anybody from a certain ethnicity because they're more likely to commit crimes. That's awful. But we have to separate the thing is the statistic true? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And is it moral to use it?
Yeah.
That gets into that bell curve
Exactly.
debate. Yeah, it's
exactly.
like, is this relevant?
Even if it's real, why do we need that information? How's it helpful?
So sometimes we use it. So there's stereotypes about ages, for instance, which is why you don't let a 5-year-old drive or a 10-year-old drive. You say, well, because it's true. It's true. 5-year-olds can't drive. What about a 17-year-old going into a bar? Well, we're going to make an arbitrary cutoff. Insurance companies will pay attention to all sorts of facts, including how old they are, their history of driving. They're just using stereotypes. But we say, okay, you could use them. I think if they use racial stereotypes, you probably say you can't use them.
Yeah.
Racial profiling by comps there's two questions here. One is, are they accurate? Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, in a generalization. But the other thing is, this is a moral thing to do. And you might say, yeah, it's true that stomping this kind of group, say young men in this community, is a better way of catching criminals than just doing it at random. But the negatives of this is you make some people feel terrible, particularly as young black men.
And you're probably perpetuating the issue
Exactly.
further. So if your ultimate goal is to not incarcerate a whole generation of people that will then create another generation of people, maybe it's not the best approach, globally speaking.
That's exactly right. If you pull aside everybody with sort of an Arab-sounding name at the airport, maybe you catch more criminals or whatever, but you also get a whole group of people feeling that they're not welcome in your country.
Exactly.
Yes. And then what comes out of that?
You can say the cost of that is greater than the benefits.
Yes.
So the important thing here is just to separate. Finding that they're right does not end the story. There's all sorts of moral reasons you might say, yeah, but don't use it.
What's crazy is these algorithms that they even try to correct so it won't segregate people into race. I read something about an algorithm that was assessing loan applicants, and they specifically forbid the algorithm to acknowledge race. But again, the algorithm has no morals, and it figures out how to identify race without identifying race. You get the pool at the end of the day, and they have the information of what music you listen to. You're going to end up finding a symmetrical group of black people.
That's right. If you have enough facts about something, you get their ethnicity pretty down right. Get whether they're a man or a woman, straight or gay or whatever. Yeah, there are things that go with it. And these algorithms often, you say, can't look at it directly. The algorithm basically say, fine, I'll figure it out some other way.
Now, you started in linguistics, so I think this might interest you as well. The part I read out of this chapter was someone saying, I can acknowledge, even if we quantified it, I've got a 3 out of 10 bias, but that doesn't mean I'm racist. To me, what's interesting about when we talk about being racist, it's the weight of the word racism and racist that precludes anyone from, like, I'm racist. Now, out of 10, Hitler was a 10. Am I a 2? Do we have a latitude for people to acknowledge I'm a 2 or a 3? I'm aspiring to get down to 2 this year, whatever the case may be. But it's almost a shell game to say I'm 4 out of 10 biased, but I'm not racist. I don't know. You get into the weight of the linguistics there.
You do. And I think it's a reason to be cautious about using terms like racist too broadly, which is everybody still worries about it's not nice to people to call them racist. But there's another problem, which is if Dax Shepard is racist, what am I going to say about David Duke? He's racist too. Okay, but that doesn't seem that bad because I know Dax, he's like a decent guy.
Right.
But David Duke's super racist.
Right. Yeah. He's an X Games racist. He's like extreme backflips racist.
I mean, I would say, as a person who has deemed some people racist and some people not, one is hateful to me. The other is a societal issue that has bled in that I think can be addressed, worked on. To me, they are different, bias and racism. I don't think everyone is racist. When you say I'm a racist, you're not. You may have biases and things that you try to counteract, but it's a much different experience I've had with you than with racist people that I have experienced.
It's not a good catch-all word, but I grew up in a society that has a baseline level of racism that I acknowledge I have with me.
Yeah, and I just think we need a richer vocabulary, because you're right that there's something we do call structural racism. There's ways in which society is a structure which really penalizes, say, people of color without anybody's bad intent. We got to be able to talk about that as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if you put it in the same category as David Duke, you lose an important distinction that's worth making. And a lot of people say, well, if I'm racist, then I guess there's nothing wrong with racism. I don't mean anything bad by it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, if everyone's racist, then I guess it's just something that happens. I guess it just is. And that goes against trying to combat it. Why combat it if it's just everywhere and everyone has it?
That's right. Another way to think from a language point of view is to pull apart a little bit categories for people like racist, misogynist, which are sort of, that's the kind of person you are. I think some people deserve those labels, but that's heavy duty stuff. As opposed to, you say something which is really demeaning to women. You could be misogynist sometimes. I could be racist sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a better way of talking about it, putting aside structural racism issues, than saying you're racist or not a racist, as opposed to saying that stuff you're doing or you're thinking is pretty unfair and pretty cruel and pretty racist.
Yeah, and it speaks to how appealing, definitive, binary things are to the human brain. We hate nuance. We hate some percentage. We hate that. Right? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Psychologists are as guilty about this as anybody else. My second to last chapter before I get to happiness is about mental illness, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, depression. This speaks to exactly what we're talking about, because many psychologists and psychiatrists think that categorizing people, this isn't like a moral issue, this is like a practical issue, is the wrong way to think about it. Rather, something like depression is a continuum. Anxiety is a continuum. Even things like psychosis can be seen as a continuum. A little bit's fine. And there's no magical point where somebody says, oh, God, you're a depressed person. You're an anxious person. It's just where you draw the lines. And as it gets worse and worse, it gets more and more of a problem. But seeing these things as continua, as opposed to discrete categories, maybe helps us think about it better.
I remember learning in anthropology that when we give someone that designation, we say, she's schizophrenic, right? Not she has a cold. When you say she has a cold, there's some implicit notion that she'll get out of that cold. In Africa, they don't do, or at least the area that was being compared, they don't have those permanent labels for mental states. It's all a cold. It's like currently they're under a spell, even sub-Saharan Africa, right? So yeah, just the permanence of our labels are a little dangerous, aren't they?
There are cultural differences in how we think about mental illness. And every culture acknowledges there are people who really need help. This isn't another way of being. This is trouble for them. They're miserable. It's destroying their lives being around them. But you can see this as this is a kind of person now versus this person as if they have COVID or AIDS or a cold. This person has a problem which could be recovered from. And it's a very different way of thinking about mental illness. I think it's one we would do well to adopt.
Yeah, it's the deframing's so destructive because it's so defeatist. It's like, that's that. Now we could maybe hope to mitigate the symptoms.
Yeah.
Okay, I adore you. I told you last time. You're just one of my favorite people. I'm going to try to ensnare you in one thing just because it came up in my mind. I want your opinion because you're smarter than me. I have a friend in town. She's a lawyer. She's in North Dakota. There's all these measures right now. You can't call a kid by a pronoun other than he or she. You know, there's all these kind of draconian trans legislative issues in North Dakota right now. I guess it's kind of the epicenter for this stuff. And she's, of course, working on the side to prevent a lot of this. And we're talking very awesome, level-headed, brilliant woman. She and I have talked about trans stuff many times in the past. But let me preface it by saying, I think a kid should be called whatever they want. That's my position. But now this cycles back to some of these studies. So she said there was a psychologist giving testimony in court the other day that demonstrated that the structure of the male brain and the female brain differ in some web-like component of the structure. And that this study proved that there were preteens that were born biologically female that had a similar webbing to the males. My knee jerk, I find that impossible to believe that there was some announcement countrywide calling all preteens that identify as trans, let's study your brain. There's no way the sample size could have been more than 10, 15 people. I can't imagine this says anything. What is your knee jerk on that?
I hadn't heard of that study. Putting aside trans issues just for a sec.
Yeah.
There are studies which ask the question, our male brains, people identify as male, different than female brains. Their legs don't tend to be larger because males are larger. Your brain scales up. Forget about that. Scale in the same size. And if you look at any specific part, the answer is no. But if you do the whole thing and you do sort of machine learning, just looking at a picture of a brain, you could figure out whether it's a man or a woman to about 90, 95% accuracy. So there are
Really?
different structures of the brain. This doesn't show it's innate. Males and females have different life experiences that could shape their brains in different ways. So the study that you described seems really interesting. If it were true that, say, trans women or trans girls had female brains, despite having, say, male genitals.
Yeah, XY.
That'd be really interesting. I just don't know about the studies. There's some deep issues here. I find a lot of these laws incredibly cruel and overreaching. That's not a psychologist, I mean, it's a moral opinion. I think the evidence is very strong that there are young children who are, say, natally male. They have penises, they have testicles, who are, to all intents and purposes, psychologically girls, and who want to dress as girls, they want to be girls, they want to present as girls. You would think that gender socialization, that would never happen. But just like kids grow up to be gay, and no one's telling them to be gay, sometimes they're gay in societies where that's savagely, punished. There are people who are physically male who feel that they're women, and people who are physically female feel that they're men. I've seen these cases, and they're very dramatic.
Yeah. My other critique of it was it's trying to play both sides. Again, I'm very pro trans rights. The initial premise is forget the science, forget X, Y, X, X. We're throwing that out because gender is a social construct. Okay, I'm with you on that argument. And now you're saying, but no, here's this biological, physiological thing I'm demonstrating in the brain that should somehow also now be integrated into this debate. Part of me goes, well, hold on now we're playing by different rules. It's all really complicated and new, and I guess there's lots of stumbling.
It's really complicated and new, but I think you're making an excellent point, which is that the existence of trans children, to me, is very powerful evidence that gender isn't merely a social construct. If it was a social construct, there shouldn't be this. It shouldn't happen. Just like the existence of gay kids shows that sexual orientation is something above and beyond how you're raised. The existence of trans kids shows that there's something in the brain that identifies with gender that might not always match your sex.
Right.
And I think these are real cases. The existence of trans people as a real phenomena, people deserve respect who are that way for reasons outside choice, is real. But to then say, oh my gosh, and gender is a construct, that's just confusion.
Yes, and I think just really easy for the opposition to start blowing holes right through.
But the reason all this is happening is because there is so much opposition. If everyone was just like, sure, whatever, let people do whatever they want to do, this wouldn't be happening. It's just everyone now feels boxed into a corner to prove. It's out of protection of people's rights. It's just tricky.
It's hard to think of an issue where people are as stupid as this issue. Not the doctors who work on it, not the psychologists, but the people on Twitter, on Facebook, in the newspapers. You have one extreme who says trans people should not exist. This bizarre view. Then you have other people who might say, take an extreme case, say that a rapist who is physically male can go into a prison and say, I'm a woman, and then should be, by through these magical words, be put into a woman's prison in cases like in the UK.
Yeah.
I think trans people and trans rape people say, that's crazy. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And that's intellectual debate in our time at its worst. I blame Twitter.
Yeah.
It's a good place to blame.
I'm just going to recommend this to you, and I'm going to let you go. Malcolm Gladwell on his Revisionist History podcast has this incredible episode about Will and Grace. I don't know if you've heard it.
Oh, yeah. I have not heard the episode, but the argument maybe one he's making is it has a transformation in how Americans thought about gay people.
Well, that's indisputable, right? We have the data pre-show, post-show, its references in society. But what he points out is that happened in an era where you had 3 channels to choose from. And there's all these incredible political science studies that back in the 80s, you could predict someone's political leanings based on how much TV they watched. And in fact, if you watched a ton of TV, you were going to track centrist. And you were going to have a lot in common with the guy on the bus next to you because everyone had watched the Cheers finale. And that power that existed in our culture. And then you get rid of the networks and you go to this fragmented streaming service and you have Orange is the New Black. You don't have to make any compromises. It's as hardcore as it gets, but it doesn't move the needle because it's not a consensus. It's not being viewed by the masses. And so, yes, Twitter, I think, but even something as innocuous as that is like going from 3 networks to 3,000 has probably had a really profound effect on us.
We're all in a world now where we could choose our own information sources, our own news sources and entertainment sources. So somebody who's very transpositive might choose a show which is transpositive, but someone who isn't is not going to choose that show. We can now choose whatever most fits our prejudices.
Yes. Even this started with me asking you what you're watching, and the odds that we weren't watching the same thing were quite high. But if I asked you in the 80s, we certainly were all watching Cheers.
Right. In some ways, very positive. But from the standpoint of social change and community, we really lose that.
Yes. Yep. We've lost some of these pillars, these monoliths.
It's just confirmation bias times 1,000. You can just choose your own adventure through life where everything is confirmed.
Yeah.
I love that way. It's just all now choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
We just choose our own.
Well, Paul, man, this was number 2. I pray there's a number 3. You're spectacular. I love your book. It's Intro to Psychology. It'll take you from point A to point B. It reminded me of Behave. I just thought Behave was insane. It's like, well, here's everything we know about the brain. And this one's, I think, a lot more approachable and accessible and fun to read. So I think it's like all those great same tenets and foundation, but really digestible. You're such a brilliant, effortless writer. And it's a great, great book. I hope everyone checks out Psych. And a pleasure to talk to you. And I really hope we get to do it again.
I just love talking to the two of you. I do hope we get to do it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Keep writing books. Or just if you see a new TV show you want to talk about, you can also, we'll talk to you about that.
I watched the Sarah Lawrence one.
Oh, yes, please do.
Do a deep dive.
You must, because we have to talk about it next time. All right. Be well. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And now my favorite part of the show, the fact check with my soulmate, Monica Padman.
Oh, my God.
Pop out.
It came.
Yeah. What do you think?
Whoa. It's messing with me because I know those glasses as your sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels, but they look nice. They look really nice.
I really like how they look.
Yeah. That's exciting.
A lot of change. It's almost like you have a different co-host now. Between the
Yeah.
chair and now the glasses.
It's true.
Does it make you feel more, though, that like, you're doing an NPR show?
Well,
not the chair, but the glasses.
Let's mix messies.
Let's see. Let me put them back on.
No.
No.
It makes me feel like you're about to get on your motorcycle.
Yeah, because the only time I wear clear glasses is to get on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
Well, I've had the same favorite sunglasses for a decade.
Yes.
Leisure Society, this particular frame. I love them. And when I finally surrendered and admitted I had to get reading glasses, I thought, well, I wonder if I could get my sunglasses. Turns out I could.
Good hack.
Yeah, my bro Shane hooked me up. Okay.
Okay.
These are transitions.
And tell
You know
me
what that
about
is?
tell me about transitions.
I don't even know if that's the real word.
Okay.
They're not prescription up top.
Oh.
And then from the mid down. So now when I look down at this piece of paper, it's like fucking banging.
Oh. But then when you
Yeah.
look at me, no.
There's no prescription.
Weird.
Yeah. I think it's going to, like, first of all, it's great. It's also going to take some getting used to. It's like, what
Definitely.
angle? Like, if I go like this now and look at you, I'm looking through prescription. But if I'm there, we're good.
And do you ever do half?
Yeah, and if this feels like you've lowered yourself underwater a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird. A whole new you.
Look at this.
Oh my God.
An educated man. You don't think you're not vibing smarter. I can feel it. It's fine.
I don't think
Glasses make someone look smarter.
it depends on the. It depends.
They just don't look right on me.
You
Is that
don't.
what?
No, I think they look great.
Oh, okay. Great.
But smart isn't the thing
That's
I'm
not
getting.
Okay. What
I
are
think
you
you'd
getting?
have
Safer?
to- No.
No.
I'm telling you what I'm getting. I'm
Oh.
getting you're about to go on a motorcycle ride.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like Clark Kent.
Okay.
Like,
A little bit
because you
of a
can tell
Clark-
he's still Superman underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Clark
think it's
Kent.
because you're still you. Like I still see your tattoos and your body, and so
It doesn't look safe.
You're trying to be a little dorky, maybe. But
no, that's what I was gonna say. Like I need
Yeah,
you to
like,
get
oh,
like.
can you help me
skinny.
with my groceries in my car? And then I'm
Yeah.
Jeffrey
it's
Dahmer.
not convincing
Oh.
enough.
Right. Because I didn't take time to even wear a long sleeve shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, glasses handles everything.
Yeah.
They'll do all the work. I wonder if cannibals, when they would look at you, if they would, because there's not a ton of meat there,
Sure.
but I also think they would think like, this is a delicacy.
Oh, a delicacy
Uh-huh.
because of the boobs.
No.
Oh.
No, everything.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
nice. Because I'm put together.
Yeah, you're just, like you could be a really high-end appetizer for a cannibal.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
I do think it would be high end because there's a lot of, it'd be a fatty appetizer because of the boobs.
Because the boobs would be in there.
Yeah. It's, again, mixed messies because there's some fat, but also.
But on a generally lean frame.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
With a fat pop-out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two.
Pair of fat pop-outs.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm scared to ask.
Yeah.
Do I look worse?
You look the exact same because I'm looking at you through no prescription.
If you look at me the other way.
Well, then you're just a Vaseline. You're a Vaseline person.
What's that mean?
Like if you imagine smearing Vaseline over the lens of a camera and then looking through it, that's what you look like when I go like that.
Why?
It's just a blur.
This is for close
These
up.
are close up.
Oh.
Yeah, which make the farsightedness terrible.
I
This is
see.
probably what you see.
I love it.
Yes, it works great for you.
Okay, so
Working
you can't
wonders.
tell me. Okay, that's good. I like that. I like that I've
There's no change.
Okay.
It would only be if you were really close to me. I could then see you now. That
Should
would
we
be the
try
difference.
it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's called progressive lens. When
Okay.
it's the transition is the light changing.
Oh,
if it
okay.
like tints when you're
Scared. I'm being
like a
vulnerable.
bifocal, I think, is when there's two prescriptions.
But 2 prescriptions. Yeah.
How close do I need to get?
Well, you look great. Okay, when you go low,
Mm-hmm.
you're a little blurry there, a little magnified. Come closer, come closer. Oh, yep. Crystal clear.
Oh.
Yeah, wonderful.
And you hated it?
No.
Feels like you did. Feels like you hate me.
Now that you've seen close.
And you finally have seen me. It's taken 10 years and you saw me.
And I'm going to stick around.
Okay.
That was the
I
verdict.
feel vulnerable.
I think that's how Rob and I feel about if you ever wear your glasses, because we know you're blind, right? And so you could scream when you saw us.
Yeah, you don't
for
know
the
what we
first
look
time.
like.
Yes.
You're like David Farrier.
I know what you two
He
look
probably
like. You're both so handsome.
you'd be shocked with how Caucasian Rob looks, knowing that he's 43% Filipino.
Okay. Wow. What a day.
What a ride! Who's this on?
Paul Bloom.
Oh boy!
Our friend is back.
Yes.
He is so smart. We love talking to him.
Too smart.
He is, but he's not. He's approachable.
He's approachable, and his book is incredibly inviting and not esoteric at all.
Yeah.
But when I talk in front of him, I'm way more insecure than I
Really?
ever am. Yes.
You did not come off. It doesn't
I'm
come
like,
off
if
that
I
way.
reference this thing I'm 70% sure on, there isn't a topic he won't know about.
Oh, that's funny.
Right.
It doesn't read that way.
Oh, okay. Well,
Although
that's reassuring.
This is a good ding, ding, ding transition-ish.
Okay.
You told me something yesterday and you said, oh, we should have talked about it on the fact check. And so here we are, another fact check.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot. We're both going on vacation.
Yes,
And
that's right.
so we're
Spring
we're
break.
piling up a little bit.
ADHD?
No, but we will.
I thought that's what you were going.
We
leading
will.
to.
I do have that written down.
Oh, okay.
You brought up something interesting about Letterman.
Oh.
Because you were talking about with Paul, like wanting to be smart or needing whatever. And this is sort of similar.
Adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I think if anyone who's listening listened to the Letterman episode and then more importantly listened to the fact check after, you would have heard that I had this kind of intense period of craving immediately after.
Yes.
That went away the next day. And my explanation at the time of the fact check was definitely that I just wanted to celebrate or I deserve something or what it's my reward.
Yeah.
That was my conclusion.
Continue the feeling, sort of.
Extend the high.
Yeah.
Commemorate. So then, and I there would have been no reason for me to add this detail. During the 8 hours of craving, I also very much wanted to send Jimmy Kimmel a text. I was thinking, like, God, if anyone would know. I mean, half of Jimmy and I's friendship is based on our mutual love for Letterman, Stern, and yacht rock. Like, that's half of our conversations. So I really wanted to text him, and then I just kept convincing myself that it would be really self-indulgent and maybe even come across as a brag, like, oh, I just interviewed Letter. I don't know. I couldn't think of a way it would not seem indulgent to send it to him. So woke up the next day, as I said, craving was over. But I had gotten an email from Kimmel the very next day. In my assumption, or at least I know from his listening pattern, if he's going to listen to us, it's generally, he's on a road trip with his family, he's driving up to Idaho.
Yeah,
he
the
doesn't have a
car
long
route.
commute and he works nonstop.
Yes.
So it's like, he's not listening,
No,
right?
he can't.
Anyways, Wednesday morning, he sent this incredibly beautiful email to me, and it was just so special in so many ways, and very validating, and
Yes.
and all these many things. And then I responded and thanked him profusely, and was really excited he had heard, because I had wanted to, blah blah blah. So then I was in therapy on Friday, post that fact check, and then in exploring it with my therapist, he kind of said, "What do you think, if, let's just assume it wasn't self-indulgent, how could he have responded that would have fulfilled whatever?"
Yeah.
And I said, I guess I wanted like a dad to call and have him say he's proud of me. I think I was really desiring that. And I think Kimmel in many ways is that for me. I've known him for 20 years now, and he's always been incredibly protective and generous, a very big brothery.
Yeah. He's like a paternal figure in some
Yes.
ways. You look up to
big
him.
brother / dad. Yeah, I totally look up to him. I respect him a ton. And I just know his character. He's
Yes.
really an exemplary
Yeah.
human. So, yeah, I guess I figured out that that's what I was craving.
Yeah.
And I was Kimmel's who can give it to me. And ultimately, I want to avail myself to him a lot more to
Yeah.
be my big brother dad.
I love that. It's so pure. It's so like, of course, all you want is a dad to say good job.
Yes. And one that kind of you kind of want selfishly too for them to understand what
The
it meant to you.
magnitude.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice because before it just feels like we placed that into like your addictive brain.
Yes. Of course. First
Just-
explanation's always got to be that.
Yeah, like, oh, that's kind of how you operate.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see there's other parts at play.
Yeah, and I will say, I think we may have talked about this in the past, but my dependence on AA was too much. I think there's a lot of room for other stuff because it did explain so much of my life for, I don't know, 15 years AA.
Yeah.
It was like, oh God, this is the first thing that's ever truly understood exactly who I am. But then also there's this Kimmel thing that has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And you really need, or I really need that other element.
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah. Well, I think it's really sweet.
Yeah, I think he is so fucking sweet.
I think being able to acknowledge that is very sweet. And I think you should tell him because I don't know if he'll listen to this episode. Because again, as you said, he's busy.
He's
So-
very busy.
He did say that in our short interaction when he was my best friend and my wingman the
Yep.
other day.
A civilian.
Just a regular old guy who hosted the Oscars a week before. He was saying like, that Letterman episode was so great. And I said, I think it meant a lot to Dax that you reached out.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's nice. You know how I actually knew it was the key to the whole thing was that when my therapist asked me to tell him what it would have meant, I said, as I was saying, be proud of me, I guess I wanted a day. I started crying.
Yeah, of course you did.
Yeah, so I think that's always a pretty big clue. I've gotten a bullseye when I'm assessing why I did something that I did.
Yeah, it's one of those things in therapy. It happens, I think, rarely if you're a you type or a me type, where you say something and you're surprised by it.
Yes, totally.
It's like, you are real time figuring something out about yourself.
Yes. And
It's really rare.
I uniquely in there have that experience where I get abnormally emotional
Same.
in the middle of something that I couldn't anticipate was going to send me that way.
Yeah, it's the only time really
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, I'll be like mad or sad other times, but like crying only happens when there's like something unexpected that happened, which is that in saying something, I learned something about myself.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It's a pretty wild experience. As you said, it's not like it's super frequent,
Yeah.
but it happens enough that you're like, this is a very wild, wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's helpful for sure. I did cancel today.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah. Okay. ADHD. And it is a ding, 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 actually. He talks about getting a bad comment on a thing he wrote. And it like all caps, you're a dumbass.
Oh, yes.
We talked about that for a fair amount. And it's a ding, ding, ding. Because yesterday, we put out a Flightless Bird pickleball. Great episode.
Yeah. Should be innocuous. Shouldn't create a lot of
Pickleball. How could pickleball be a problem? One
Not a
would
polarizing
say.
topic.
And you pop in for that. You came up to like drop something off. We were in
Didn't
here.
know you were recording. I was
Yes.
carrying a lamp or something.
Yeah. You were carrying a equipment piece, like a
A
thing.
mic
Mic
stand.
stand.
Yeah,
Yep,
mic stand. And you came, you sat, you chatted. It was so fun. David met Frito. He hated that. That was very fun.
Uh-huh.
In it, David, sort of haphazardly, says, my friend thinks I have ADHD and that I should get it checked out, diagnosed, whatever. Me and you pretty quickly say, why would you do that?
Right. You don't have ADHD, is what I think I went so far as to say that.
Maybe
right?
you said that. I don't even know if you said that. Actually, I don't know if you said that. I think we were just like, why would you do that? What are the consequences? Like, what is the reason?
What symptom are you treating? with
Exactly.
this? Yeah.
And then we put this out. Some people are very upset by this and they're taking it very personally. And I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was in my 30s. We are not saying, first of all, we're not saying ADHD isn't real.
Right.
We're also not saying ADHD is shaped. Like there was a few people who were like, I had a lot of shame around it, and so that's why I didn't look into it, and so this feels like you guys are shaming him.
The ones I read were like, you said Dax is basically saying that we can't be productive. That is not what I said.
Yeah. Well, also, look, so I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this because he talks about it all the time on his podcast, but Elizabeth and Andy. Andy got diagnosed with ADHD like last year.
Okay.
And he is a music producer. He's very good at his job. He's very prolific. He works really hard.
Yeah.
But there are pieces of his life that felt like unmanageable / there were parts where he was like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand this about me,
Yes, sure.
which is why he looked into it.
Mm-hmm.
It had
Right.
nothing to do with the work. It was more actually like personal life stuff.
Uh-huh.
So, I do think it can manifest in a lot of ways. And never would I say, Andy, why would you go get that checked out? You're successful and productive.
No.
If he's like, yeah, I'm having issues, X, Y, Z.
Yes.
Then I'm like,
yes.
of course, get that checked out. David wasn't saying, I'm having issues with this.
Yeah, he wasn't complaining about a list of symptoms, and then the person concluded you
Like,
have ADHD.
oh, you might have ADHD, you
This is
should
a
look.
general observation, I think, about David's disposition
Right.
this person was making.
Which felt like, to me, that's so different. And it's just to clarify. And we're just talking about David. And
Just David.
There's
That's my
no,
only opinion I have about someone that has ADHD
we have
is David.
and there's no judgment on our end around ADHD.
I'm pro ADHD. I've
but
said on here
really-
1,000 times, when you give them the bees that medicine, they don't go out and find new pollen.
And I mean, this is the thing that hurts my feelings when I read those things, really on your behalf. I think if you listen to this show, you have to know that you, me, but especially you, are not in a shame game and not trying to bring someone down or
Stigmatize. anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like we fight against that all the time. That's like a huge tenet of what we
kind of
do.
the-
It's like what we
kind
do.
of the whole aim of.
And look, I'm also open. I am open to
'Cause we do
someone
fuck
saying,
up.
Of course we fuck up.
Yes, and we've said sorry for fucking up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I am open for people being like, actually, you guys did kind of miss the mark here. We were talking about a very specific situation. David Ferrier in front of us, who we know very well.
Yes.
And he, again, was not complaining about anything. And David also is David. He's like throwing shit out there. He got bit by a squirrel.
Yeah,
like, this is him. He's a cartoon. We
Yeah,
love him.
Yeah. Or two.
But like, we're not saying anything blanketly about ADHD. Anywho, so I just wanted to address that, and I'm always upset if people are hurt by us. I mean, that's really also there's a piece of it.
Yeah. Every time I go on that thing, I'm just like, does anyone like it?
Yeah.
They don't like me or you, which is insane.
I mean, but they do. Like,
Well, sure,
that's
certainly the
thing.
majority do.
Yeah, and
Yes. It's a hugely successful
yes,
show.
it's a very
Yes.
successful show. So I don't think I'm not going to let that be the narrative. Like, I don't believe that is true.
Right. I just think it's really funny to see hatred pointed at you and I. There's something
Yeah, it
bigger.
hurts.
There's something bigger. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to hurt our feelings. Like, again, circling back to this whole episode, the negativity bias is strong. So when those
Yeah.
are at the top,
yeah. Someone wrote like David hated Frito and Dax wouldn't stop. He wouldn't. He had told him many. It's like literally starts sounding like the Me Too moment that David experienced with Frito. Unless it was the very first thing you ever had heard, and you've never heard any of us,
yeah.
you could maybe construct that.
That's the thing. It's like relationship has to be part of the context. Like,
Yeah,
there's
friends.
a relationship
There's
between the three of us.
Yes, we're all friends.
Yeah, it's
It's interesting.
it's interesting. I do. I will not speak for you or him, but I'm sorry if you were hurt by what we said. But I am clarifying that we were not talking about you.
Right.
And we are not talking about ADHD as a general thing. We are talking about
Whether David or not has it or not. Yeah. Yeah.
our friend.
Yep.
Who
Yeah.
I love you guys, but we know better than you do.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
That is that. All right. So something else that I assume we might get some comments on
Okay.
is Paul, it's his belief that repressed memories aren't real.
Oh, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure a lot of people believe that they are.
Mm-hmm.
I did
Well,
my
we
own.
have since interviewed somebody who is telling us about theirs.
Yes.
Yeah. Post hearing this.
Yes. And we're not saying, oh, actually, those aren't real.
Nope.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's room for all of it. But when I look up repressed memories, like I started to do some research on it, it's all about some psychologists believe, some psychiatrists believe. There actually is not consensus on
Okay,
repressed
okay.
memories. So
Right.
I don't feel bad about keeping that in because it's not like
It's
a
one
thing.
side of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, can't say it hasn't happened,
Right.
but it's not what our
Yeah. I
brains
think
are
he's just saying
trying
like.
to do.
Right. Mechanically, that's not a function our brain has been observed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do think some things are so hard for us to like admit to ourselves
Confront.
that we
Mhm.
do put them in boxes.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think that means they're not gone and then all of
Right.
a sudden they come in. It's you can choose to open the door. You've just really locked it and put it away.
And again, as we talk about so often on here, your story is so real that any evidence in the contrary has got to be ignored.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I did a tiny experiment
Oh, fun.
because we talked about the cool test they did where they asked people right after 9/11 to like share their experience.
Oh, right. And then
Like a
went
year later,
back.
5 years later, whatever,
Yeah.
and it keeps changing. Also, Malcolm referenced that also on one of the revisionist histories. I think the one about Brian Williams.
Oh, right. Right.
I think it was on that one.
That was a great one.
Yes.
We,
So,
we all left liking Brian Williams, right?
like, again, humans are humans and
Mhm.
fallible and all of it. So, Callie and I were together during 9/11.
Okay.
And so I asked her what her memory was.
Oh, fun.
Okay?
Okay.
This is what she said. Okay, my memory. We were in third period, Miss Rosen, and watching the internal DHS news. DHS, Duluth High School.
Sure. Best
Go
network.
Wildcats.
Best network in Duluth.
The internal DHS news. Even that, I would never say that. Like that, I don't even know. It's called that? What? But she was on broadcast, so that probably is what it was
Right.
called. Anyway, internal DHS news, and they mentioned there was an attack. Then we turned on the actual news and watched. Kevin was pretty nervous about his dad at the Pentagon.
Ooh.
Then I remember going to fourth period math, and she wouldn't let us watch the news and insisted we take a quiz instead, which was so wild. Mine isn't so far
Dissimilar.
off of this, but what I guess I want to ask her is, because I believe
Yeah.
that we watched live the second tower go down. And I don't know if I'm making that up. Let me ask her.
I wonder, because if you're my age, that moment was the space shuttle that blew up that we were all watching. I think every kid in America was watching, and that happened real time.
You saw real time, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's something that I could imagine is maybe falsified because I've seen it so much.
Yeah.
And they were replaying it, obviously.
Yep. Yeah.
But to
yeah, that's the
me-
most seared in part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. More than the planes, even.
To me, it was like the first one happened, and then they told us to turn on the news, and we did, and then we saw the second one
And I told you, I have a journal entry from,
that day.
yeah.
You should have read it.
I wish I would have known.
I
Also,
should've
I'm glad I
prepped you.
didn't, because it would have been such a pain in
Finding
the ass to
it.
find this.
I wonder what your thoughts were. Do you think there were any racist ones?
No. Mine was very libertarian. I was like, I can feel right now that this country's going to react so passionately and reactively that civil liberties are about to go away. I just was like, oh, we're going to watch the whole machine.
Oh,
where the
interesting.
government kind of has a lot of control. And
Wow.
I mean, the Department of Homeland Security, that didn't even exist pre 9/11. And it's now the biggest agency, I think, financially.
Yeah.
I mean,
know,
that didn't
that's
even,
crazy.
yeah, that's a result of that. I could feel,
And airport security, all of that. I mean, that I feel like I can't remember a time before airport security was the way it is. But I was in 9th grade, so obviously I'd been on many trips.
Yeah. And I was traveling nonstop with doing the car shows. So yeah, it was radically easier.
It was so our friend Molly, her daughter just visited, and she's 13. She just visited her brother in Oregon. And she was showing me this video of her little niece like being excited for Lily to come. She pulls it up to show me, and I was like, are they at the gate? And she was like, yeah. How? Like my brain was fritzing out. I was like, how'd they get to the gate? And she said if it's a minor coming off the plane, they figured out a way to get them to the gate, but felt crazy.
Right.
And like that used to be
because
normal.
we were watching a video. Oh my God. And then I said, I used to always pick up Aaron from LAX, and I would go there with a 12-pack. You could also just bring fucking a 12-pack of beer into the airport. Yes, LAX. And then I would sit there and pound beers and smoke cigarettes, waiting for him to arrive. And then he'd get off, and I'd be 5-6 beers deep. He'd hand him one. We'd drink in the airport.
Oh my God.
Drink at the baggage claim. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just go party at his gate. I mean, quite literally.
So weird.
Yeah. I'll go early. I'll bring a 12-pack. Treat it like a fucking picnic area at a park.
That's nuts. Yeah, but okay, she hasn't responded. But but yeah, our friend Kevin, who was like hot he was like a popular boy.
Hot shot.
He was a hotshot. His dad worked at the Pentagon, and I do remember that being someone came and got Kevin
Okay.
and like took him out.
Put him in a helicopter.
Yeah, and that was like kind of exciting. It was
Of
like,
course,
oh my
made him hotter.
God. Yeah. Oh my God,
Yes.
something's happening with Kevin.
Yes.
He's.
Yes.
Oh, I gotta
Oh
go.
my God,
I gotta
so
go protect him. It's so hot.
He's getting hotter and hotter.
His dad's in peril.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
That's how it does happen. It's not much of a embellishment of what happens.
With me?
All of us.
Yeah. I think. Is it all of us?
I think if you're the hot boy in school, I think most of the girls are feeling like, oh no, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, that does make them hotter. Now he's like got drama.
Yeah. Okay. So towards the end of the episode, we talk about racism a little bit. We talk about the term.
Uh-huh.
And it was ironic because you said, I am racist.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about like the scale. And then I said, I don't think you are.
Mm-hmm.
I gave my reasons for that, mainly being I have fear around labeling everyone blanketly a racist because then I'm worried that's just like, okay, I guess that's just what we do, so it's fine.
Right, I guess
like
we
nothing
all
to fix.
are. Uh-huh.
But then a few days later, I'm at this event,
The
Race
documentary.
to Dinner.
Yeah.
And of course, at the very beginning of the doc, they ask everyone who's racist here.
Mm-hmm.
And, most people know to raise their hand. Some people don't. But it was just funny because it had come so quickly after I had let you off the hook.
Right.
I see. Yes, we are, because we're all part of this system, and there's stuff like that we are.
Yeah. You just too late. Your brain. You already presented.
But I don't like too late. That's the part that's
No. I mean, too late. That was your childhood.
Yeah.
Every time a black person was on TV, they were robbing a white woman.
Yes.
Like, do you think that isn't in your brain?
Right, it's there.
Yeah, unless you had tons of contact to counter that depiction that was ubiquitous.
Yeah, and it's a matter of just like working hard after the initial thought to bring yourself morally back down.
Right. Bring that frontal lobe into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and counter it with some challenges.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that timing was sort of interesting.
That was.
Anyway, that's all.
Oh, wow. What if you popped us up with that little email that you just read, but we can't read out loud.
I got a really cool email in the middle of this that I've now cut.
About a guest.
Yeah. Potential guest.
Potential guest. And we didn't want
It's not Ben and
Matt. You don't have to worry about that. Oh, wow. Okay, great.
It's exciting.
Okay. Well, congratulations on another great fact check. And
Thank you.
Yeah. Being
Thank
a
you.
part of another chat with Paul Bloom.
Yeah. Congratulations to you.
Neither of us deserve a chat with Paul Bloom for 2 hours. What a racket we've got. We're running here. This is a fucking
I think
crime
you deserve
syndicate.
it.
No.
Mm-hmm. That's when you say, I think you deserve it.
Yes, you deserve it.
I think
if I deserve it, you do deserve it.
No.
Yeah, but do either of us deserve it?
I hope you have a great vacation.
You too. Get out in that sun and worship it. Okay?
I will. We'll probably do a fact check from the vacation, so you guys stay tuned for that.
Yep. Just hold on the line.
We'll be right back.
All right, love you.
All right, love you.